Hello, I'm Mark Supreme. Welcome to American Verses, featuring the phenomenal works of Terry Atkins, Mark Bradford, and Kerry James Marshall.
The Peoria Riverfront Museum displays objects that tell stories, and stories inspire people. In partnership with Art Bridges and the Crystal Bridges Museum, we have brought to Central Illinois 3 of the world's most influential contemporary American artists. This exhibition is a celebration of Atkins' native son, Bradford's Stelxiopea, and Marshall's Our Town.
Before we speak individually about each artist, we should look at what ties them and all of us together. As human beings, we strive for a sense of belonging, a spot we can call our own. Throughout history, Black artists have struggled to find this space, their space. Kerry James Marshall would travel to museums across the United States and not see himself represented on the gallery walls. Terry Atkins observed that history tended to forget or fail to recognize the influence and work of Black Americans. And Mark Bradford utilizes his work to offer a lens to the Black experience to those that would otherwise not understand. It would be easy to say that American Verses exists because all 3 artists are influential to the Black community and have created a path for Black art to thrive, but this clearly minimizes the true breadth of the impact of their work. Black history is American history. Their art allows us to see that we cannot and should not separate the two.
These artists explore identity within the art world and in history to pave a distinct path for Black expression. We will see that by telling their story with pencil on paper, brush on canvas, or through sculptural elements, the legacy and wisdom of these artists and the experience of Black Americans, and all Americans, can live on for future generations.
Thank you to Alice Walton's Foundation, Art Bridges, and Crystal Bridges Museum for sharing these pieces. Alice Walton is the lead collector of American art, preserving its tradition and legacy. It's an honor and privilege for the Peoria Riverfront Museum to have the works of these artists from her collection. But why are these pieces chosen to be featured together in the gallery?
The 3 artists chosen to comprise the exhibition American Verses, Terry Atkins, Mark Bradford, Kerry James Marshall, were selected from the permanent collections of Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art and Art Bridges, both of which are located in Bentonville, Arkansas, and are founded by philanthropist Alice Walton. The exhibition positions works by contemporary African-American male artists whose curated works rely on a variety of literary references to inform the traditions of painting and sculpture. By incorporating the written forms of the novel, the play, and Greek mythology, these artists are in a way reinventing famous works of language. They are also asking questions about how stories influence us and how we apply our own experience into them. Ultimately, American Verses explores ideas and experiences that make us unique, yet awaken an awareness of commonality. Curiously, the use of varying works of literature in the exhibition both illuminate perspectives and invite interpretations from the African-American male point of view. Now let's get into what these pieces mean, but remember, art has no right answer. An artist's perspective and materials may tell us one side of the story, but the rest is up to the viewer. What do you see when you look at these works of art? Does it mean anything to you? Terry Atkins' native son may look like just a pile of symbols. And you'd be right. Atkins would collect materials from junkyards among other places and keep them for future projects. The materials were then set aside until they revealed to him their final construction, a process that Atkins created called potential disclosure. For native son, Atkins found that the loud, percussive nature of the symbols represented the perceived aggressive Black male, as described in the 1940 novel by Richard Wright of the same name. These symbols are meant to shock and startle the viewer as the trigger mechanism is unseen below a layered surface, never knowing when it will be activated. For Mark Bradford, his Stelxiopea collage is modeled after the story of a Greek siren, seen as an alluring monster who would drag sailors to the depths of the sea. Bradford expounds this idea in his recreation of the murky waters. The piece itself is constructed with end papers used in jerry curls, something familiar to Bradford, as his mother owned and operated a hair salon where he once worked. By using the end papers he happened upon in his environment, his materials play with a personal connection that resonates with Black Americans. By using materials that come from or reflect his environment, Bradford's work underscores a sense of belonging for those that are from places like his. This sense of belonging tells a story of Black Americans who would not only be familiar with the physical material that created the piece, but the emotions associated with the theme of Bradford's work. And finally, Kerry James Marshall's preparatory sketches of his painting Our Town provides a view to the planning process of his art. Marshall's art introduces rich shades of black into the canon and carves space for every shade to be on display. Our Town, sharing a namesake with Thornton Wilder's 1938 play about an average American white family, is replaced with the harsh reality of Black families of the same era. Marshall takes traditionally white portraits and reiterates them in a uniquely Black interpretation. As in this painting, an idyllic American family home is sitting next to government housing projects, typically occupied by minority families.
The journeys of Terry Adkins, Mark Bradford, and Kerry James Marshall tell a story of how each creates space for Black art to exist in the art world. Even more so, each of these works tells their own story of what it means to be Black in America and allows all those that experience the work to get a glimpse into that life. Due to their efforts, Black art has been pushed to the forefront of conversations and is now readily seen in museums as a topic of study and appreciation. We thank each of them for their contributions and what their art continues to do. Now is the time for the next generation of young artists to step into this space, push boundaries, and creatively share their stories through art.
American Verses celebrates the great history of American art, and we would again like to thank Art Bridges and the Crystal Bridges Museum for sharing these pieces with Peoria. Thank you.
Wall, this not what your mama bought you. $1 million pieces owned by Alice Walton. Even P. Diddy spent millions at an auction. And you know that money went to Kerry James Marshall. You can be an artist making millions, this is awesome. Portraits on the side of a building up in Boston. Now your stuff priceless, billions what it's costing. Yeah, I got that power, feeling like I'm Austin. 3 powerhouses in the building and they flossing. Terry's art's alive, you can still hear it talking. 50 Shades of Paper marker tell you how he marked them. Most influential is Kerry James Marshall, American Verses. This is how it started, and we want to say thank you to Alice Walton.